Can you hear me? Yes? Okay, excellent. I don't want to steal too much of your time because we're already a little bit behind, and I think we have so much so much to hear from our next guest, and we are very, very proud and very happy to have him here. He will talk about the future of work and the future of automation and how these two are intertwined and what we may need to do to make the future of work a desirable one. And so please put your hands together for Andrew Young.
Thank you. You're applauding very softly. No, I'm just kidding. Hello all, I'm Andrew Yang. I'm running for president as a Democrat in 2020. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm not a politician. At least I guess I'm something of a recent politician. I started an organization called Venture for America 7 years ago. How many of you have heard of Venture for America? Some of you? So Venture for America recruits and trains hundreds of young aspiring entrepreneurs to create businesses in Detroit, Cleveland, St. Louis, Birmingham, Baltimore, and other cities around the country. So I spent 7 years helping create several thousand jobs. I was awarded an honorary ambassadorship from the Obama White House. A documentary was made about Venture for America that's now on Netflix. Raise your hand if you like documentaries. So there's a documentary on Netflix with an Oscar-winning director called Generation Startup that's available now in your queue. So I did this work for 7 years, and I learned a ton about what's going on in the rest of the country. I'm a New York area product, and so I had never been to Northeast Ohio or Missouri or Alabama or any of these places. I took the headphones off. She was like, oh, I can hear this guy. Until Venture for America, and I was staggered at how disparate the situation is in different parts of the country. How many of you all are from the Midwest? South? So when I was flying between Detroit and San Francisco or Birmingham and New York, I often felt like I was traveling between dimensions or ways of life more than a couple time zones. But this really hit home to me when Donald Trump won the election in 2016. Where my reaction was like, how the heck did that happen? We just elected a narcissist reality star. This is a terrible, terrible sign for our civilization, which is unfortunately proven to be correct. And so I started digging into the numbers, and I realized that there's one major reason why Donald Trump is our president today. He's our president because we automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri, Iowa, all of the swing states he needed to win. And unfortunately, my friends in Silicon Valley know full well that we're about to do the same thing to millions of retail workers, call center workers, fast food workers, truck drivers, and then what happened to the manufacturing workers in the Midwest and the South is about to rip through our society. It's also going to affect white-collar workers like bookkeepers and accountants, lawyers. I was an unhappy corporate attorney for 5 months, and I guarantee you that that job can be automated away. Even pharmacists, radiologists, this is going to affect about 44% of jobs, blue collar and white collar, that are called repetitive cognitive or repetitive manual jobs. And so I wrote a book on the subject called The War on Normal People, talking about how the most common jobs in the U.S. are customer service, retail, food service and food prep, truck driving, which is the most common job in 29 states. There are 3.5 million truckers, 94% men. Average age 49, average education high school. So what I tell people is the person you think of as a truck driver, that's actually a truck driver. Like there's not like some other profile of truck driver. Like that's actually hip. In manufacturing, those 5 jobs are half of the American workforce. What proportion of Americans graduate from college? It's 32%. So when you think about the average American worker is a high school graduate or had 1 year of college. And their average wage is about $15 an hour. 57% of Americans today cannot afford an unexpected $500 bill. So their ability to somehow move or get retrained or do something or start their own business, very, very low. So that's the reality in much of the country. And we're in the third inning of the greatest economic and technological transformation in the history of the world. And the third inning has brought us Donald Trump. So then I went to Washington, D.C. and said, hey, guys, I'm Andrew. I'm cool. We've hung out together. What are we going to do about the fact that this is the macro trend that is displacing millions of Americans? Right now, as we're together in this beautiful environment, the labor force participation rate in the United States of America is 62.9%, the same levels as El Salvador and the Dominican Republic. And this is year 10 of an expansion. So this is not speculative anymore. This is right now. This is real. So I went to the folks in D.C. and asked them, hey, guys, what are we going to do? And what do you think senior lawmakers, including many Democrats, said to me when I asked them, what are we going to do about the fact that the economy is changing forever? Like, how do you think they answered that question? He's shrugging. He's like, oh. The three major responses I got were, number one, we can't talk about that. Number two, we should study that further. And then number three, we must educate and retrain Americans for the jobs of the future, which is the most competent and rational sounding one. And then I said, hey guys, I looked at the numbers. You all want to guess what the effectiveness rate of government funded retraining programs are on a percentage basis? Like, what percent effective do you think they are? Tiny. No one ever guesses 90. No one ever is like, oh, it's going to be great. We're going to be great at that. Yeah, the real percentages are between 0 and 15. And fewer than 10% of workers qualify for retraining anyway. It's not like when a mall closes, there's an army of government officials being like, we're here to retrain you. I mean, that's not real life. And so when I point out to the politician, hey guys, we're shit terrible at retraining and most people don't qualify anyway, then they're like, well, don't know what to tell you. Like, that's my talking point. We'll get better. Like, great meeting. And so then I had to reckon with this reality, and I want you to all, like, you know, join me in. Are we just so backwards as a society that our government is going to do next to nothing in the face of the greatest economic and technological transformation in human history? Yeah, that's the plan, more or less. Like, in another era, if MIT, Bain, McKinsey, Elon Musk, Zuckerberg, everyone got together and said, hey, this is going on, 30% of American jobs are going to be automated by 2030, 12 years from now, that would be front page news. There'd be like this giant Marshall Plan. The government would say, okay, we have to like make big moves. But none of that is happening. You're all incredibly educated and savvy. Most of you have never heard of this MIT or Bain or White House report, much less the average American. So I'm now running for president to help advance our society in the face of this automation wave that we're in the midst of. And so there are three big moves we have to make. The first big one is universal basic income, which I have rebranded the freedom dividend because it tests much better among Americans with the word freedom in it. So the freedom dividend would give every American adult $1,000 a month, free and clear, no questions asked. And the most dramatic thing is what happens in the family when you see some money come in. So you see children's nutrition improve, education rates rise, mental health improves, domestic violence goes down, hospital visits go down. People are able to walk away from exploitative and abusive relationships, both at home and at work. This is what happens on $1,000 a month because, again, 57% of Americans right now can't afford an unexpected $500 bill. Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, week to week, month to month. And so there's a mindset of scarcity that has overtaken this country. Not being able to pay your bills has the mental impact of decreasing your IQ by 13 points. That's one standard deviation. So if you think this country is getting dumber, it is. And the reason it's getting dumber is because people can't pay their bills. So the way you can reverse that is by the freedom dividend. $1,000 a month would create millions of jobs. It would grow the consumer economy by about 10%, and would be the greatest catalyst for entrepreneurship, creativity, and meaning in the history of the world. And we can totally do it. It passed the House of Representatives twice in 1971. Richard Nixon was for it. Milton Friedman was for it. And one state has already passed something like this. It's been in effect for 36 years where everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. And what state is that? And how do they fund it? And what is the oil of the 21st century? Data. Yes. So we're going to put in place a tax to harness the gains from all this new information and AI and big data and autonomous vehicles. We're going to take that value and return it to the American people. So that's big step number one. Number two is we have to get healthcare off the backs of American families and businesses. 94% of the new jobs created in the U.S. since 2005 have been temporary gig or contractor jobs that do not have healthcare benefits. It makes no sense to tie healthcare to employment when people don't have full-time jobs, and that's going to get worse and worse. So we have to get healthcare off the backs of families and businesses and move to a single-payer system, which is what other countries have already done. And the third thing, which I think you're going to enjoy, we're in the midst of the greatest measurement problem in the history of the world as well. How many of you wake up excited about your contribution to GDP every day? You're like, I'm going to do a good job today. So GDP is a measurement we fabricated almost 100 years ago during the Great Depression. The country was doing very badly. The government smart guys were looking around and being like, what are we going to do? Like, we need a number. So this guy, Simon Kuznets, came up with GDP. He's an immigrant. And he said a few things. He said, number one, this is a terrible measurement for national well-being, and we should never use it as that. Number 2, we should include parenthood and motherhood in the number because it adds so much value. And number 3, we should not include military defense spending because it does not actually add any economic value. We shouldn't make it part of GDP. Of course, we ignored all those things. And now we're going to ride GDP off a cliff almost 100 years later because GDP is going to go up and up as trucks drive themselves, and the average quality of life for Americans is going down and down. Where I mentioned the labor force participation rate, almost 1 in 5 prime working age American men between the ages of 21 and 30 has not worked in a year, right now. Our life expectancy has declined for 3 straight years, almost unheard of in a developed country. 8 Americans are dying of drugs every hour. This place is actually falling apart. It's disintegrating. And if you travel the country, you'll see what I mean. I mean, I'm like a good progressive, so you're not supposed to say, like, what the hell's going on here? But when you go to a lot of these places, you're like, oh my gosh, like what is going on? And then when you say, hey, care about climate change, it just seems ridiculous. Like, you know, you have to give people a chance to have their heads up and have a sense of inclusion in the future. So that is the big plan. We have to move on from GDP. We have to include economic measurements that actually you all would get excited about. So how would you measure the economy in ways that would actually correspond to how we're doing? If GDP is dumb, which it is. Happiness. Sure. Mental health and freedom from substance abuse. That would be a very important one. Number of headsets in a room. No, I'm kidding. Sorry? Yeah, cognitive development, education rates, childhood success. One of the things I talk about is that my wife is at home with our 2 boys, one of whom is autistic. And what is her contribution to GDP? 0 in the way it's certain, but it should be much, much higher. So we have to start advancing our society. We have to move the economy forward. So Donald Trump is our president today because he identified these problems, but then his solutions are garbage and nonsense. It's like build the wall, keep people out, freeze time, turn the clock backwards. And we have to do the opposite of that. We have to move the clock forward. We have to accelerate our country and our society. And I would submit to you all that the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. So if you'd like to join me in making this revolution real, please do go to yang2020.com. I have one volunteer, Katie, who's going to be joining us. And let's make this real together because in a democracy, there's absolutely nothing stopping a majority of us from declaring ourselves a dividend. Thank you all very, very much. Excellent. Even better. I love me some Q&A.
I know that normally we should use the app. Yeah, but if you have questions, we will just repeat the questions into the microphone so we can then have it on the live stream. Yeah, or the wireless mic, even better. Perfect.
Thank you, Andrew. I think I heard you on the Sam Harris podcast
Yeah.
a few months ago.
Yep.
So I'm a huge fan already. Glad to have you here. My question is around, building what your thoughts around building a coalition on the universal basic income, and because I do submit that there's a lot of value in that because I think it's in the conversation around citizenship and vulnerability and the global conversation going on shame, one of the first steps in feeling that your government is actually valuing you is saying, hey, we value your life just for being a citizen and you are here with inherent value. Universal basic income is a really good quantifier of that offering. What are the ways that you're thinking about building coalition among the established institutions? I know you mentioned that those things have already passed, but what realistically can we be doing to build that?
Thank you. What's your name?
John Luis.
John Luis? Thank you so much. So one of the main obstacles we have to overcome is that people associate universal basic income with douchey tech bros, generally speaking. And I don't know how bro-y I come across to you all. I started something with venture in its name, and so people assume I was a venture capitalist and don't realize it was a 501c3 that trains young entrepreneurs to work in Detroit. And so we need women to look at it and say, what would be great for women? Universal basic income. because women do the majority of the unrecognized and undercompensated work in society, and this would at least help balance the scales and put women in position to be able to, again, walk away from abusive jobs or relationships. You know what would be great for underrepresented minorities? Universal basic income, because people of color have been excluded from educational access and opportunities and professional opportunities, and putting economic power into your hands would be incredibly powerful. So one study I found that really shook me to the core, and this just shows how dysfunctional and distrustful America is. We look at our schools and say, hey, you know what the answer to everything is? Education. We can just get people better education, all be well. And then buried in the data is that 65 to 70% of school outcomes are determined outside of the home. So that's parental time and education, that's levels of stress in the household, that's type of neighborhood someone grows up in, that's the peer community, like all of these things, 2/3 of it's outside the school. And so we're looking at schools being like, why can't you do it? Why can't you do it? Of course they can't do it. They're like only 1/3 of the process. So putting economic buying power into people's hands would improve the other 65 to 70%. So all of the issues that people care about, gender, race, education, universal basic income is the most powerful equalizer that's actually achievable in our society. Because again, all it takes is 51% of Americans getting behind it. But I need your help, Jean Louis. I need people here to see that universal basic income is not some weird techno-utopian thing. It strengthens children, families, women, citizens, like we need to make it something that becomes real for more and more people, and I would love your help making that possible.
Thank you so much.
Well, one question. I love that question, though. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew Yang.